Thank you for tuning in to Radicards.com. I have with me Brian Hayes of Lingua Sports Cards again as a continuing co-host, if you will. Thanks, Brian, for joining us.
Hey Patrick, it's good to be back.
Okay, how you been?
Doing well. I've been pretty busy, but life's good. Can't
Awesome,
complain.
awesome. So in this segment, Brian and I are going to be dissecting answers to three questions. If you're unfamiliar with this segment, we talk about three questions, and we talk about them for 5 minutes each. Standard deviation of about 3 to 5 minutes for miscellaneous dialogue. So let's just get right into it here. Question number one. How can growing your collection impact your respect for the stuff you already have?
Well, that's a really good question. Collecting cards is something where so often it's the case when we obtain a card. We're as soon as we obtain that card, bring it into our collection, we're already looking to the next thing, right? So we don't always, take the time just to sit back and appreciate what we have. Um, I think sometimes how it works is when a collector has a real focus to his or her collection, whatever that may be, and as the quality of that collection improves, as more cards are obtained, your your own collection, is improving, which can lead often to the situation where you find that most of the cards that you want for your collection you already own, and it gets harder to add more pieces to your collection. So, for example, if you're like a rookie card collector and you've got a lot of rookie cards, you might find, oh, I've already got most of the pieces that I want. Like, especially like if you're after a certain player, like if you're like, I want rookie cards of, so and so player, and you obtain them all, you start to appreciate that because there's a sense of completeness in your collection. There's that satisfaction of feeling that you had a tangible goal and you're starting to complete that goal or approach completeness. And when you can feel that, you can sense that your own collection is building up over time, there is that sense of appreciation. So maybe it's not something where any individual card that you bring in, there's like a big wow moment. But when you can look at that entire collection, set it down on a table, look at all those cards together, as a true collection, right? As something that you've built with over oftentimes a long period of time, that satisfaction is definitely there. So I think that's just for me personally, that's how I feel about it. Sometimes I'll add a card to my collection and it's nice, but then boom, I'm looking for something else. But when you add that collection, you set it down with all of your other collection, and you see that collection all together. It's a really nice feeling.
Yeah, that's a good thing. We're kind of in this hobby of what's the next thing, and
Yeah.
not really remembering or being satisfied with what we already have. You know, we're always on eBay looking for something new instead of looking at the stuff we've already purchased. It's either on our desk waiting to be organized into our collection or already in our collection. And so um, I think about this often with higher end buys. I'll get something and be like, well, I guess it's sort of like is somewhat more desirable than the other version of that card I might already have or whatever. But whatever the case is, that buying something new kind of fills that hole of I want to look for another, check something off my list or, just add something new to the collection instead of going to my collection and kind of sifting through it and saying, oh yeah, I remember when I bought that, or that gives me a memory of this time when and X Y Z. So I think growing a collection can in fact influence our behavior toward how we perceive our current collection that we've already amassed,
Yeah.
in a way that might allow us to kind of take for granted the collection that we've already put together, which might be stellar or not. Whatever the case is, I just noticed that I think, at least for me, I spend more time looking for stuff I need than appreciating the stuff I already have. But I'll go on my museum and spend some time like reviewing stuff that I already have. Um, because I spent so much time building the museum, I've seen all those cards many, many, many times. But it's really nice to go through and see what I've already put together. And sometimes I just put away online shopping entirely and just appreciate that I've put this together. And collecting, I think, it's like that old saying, it's the journey that's more important than the finish line, than the end point. So completing the goal, you're kind of left with like, oh, I don't do that anymore. I don't look for those cards because I finished it. Um, you know, is that less satisfying than actually working toward the goal? See, that's kind of the beauty of player collecting because you'll never get them all. So there's always something more to get, and there's stuff being pumped out every year. So that the options for new stuff to acquire and add to a collection are never ending. Whereas if you collect a set or a parallel set, and you put together something that has a finite number of items that you can put together and eventually you finish, the excitement can dwindle in a way because you're no longer working on that anymore. And some of us will just sell the whole package as a set. But I'm glad we got to talk about that because that's something I think that a lot of us have, at least I can at least assume that a lot of us have thought about this in
Yeah,
some way or another as collectors.
I know I have. Your point about looking at cards that you don't own more than cards that you do own. That's me, and I'm sure it is for a lot of people. Like it just I never really thought about that, but I'm just thinking over like what has been my experience over the last year or two, really collecting cards hard. You're right. I've looked, actually viewed and appreciated many more cards that I don't own than I actually own. I definitely appreciate the stuff that I have, but it's like you're saying, just it's on to the next thing. So often is the case. Sometimes it's good just to catch our breath.
Well, humans are attracted to novelty, right? That's the psychology behind as how we are built as humans. So if it's something new, obviously we're going to be more inclined to be attracted to it than something we already have. It's like
Yeah,
we appreciate the things more that we don't own because we haven't experienced those things. There's
yeah,
the experiential value in something we don't own doesn't exist. So if we look forward to acquiring that thing and then have it, then we're like, okay, what else can I get? So
yeah.
anyway, that's kind of an interesting question. I'm glad we got to talk about that. Question 2. In what ways can method of storing and archiving, or lack thereof, influence your excitement on collecting something new?
Well, if you're, storing your cards. That's really important, obviously, for two reasons: for organization and also just to keep your cards safe. So if if you've got a collection, especially a large collection that isn't organized well, you're gonna. To me, that would be overwhelming. Now, a lot of collectors, they're very, I don't know if OCD is the right word, but you hear that idea thrown out a lot about, a lot of collectors want very specific things about individual cards. Um, but I still see, it's not too rare to see collections that just they're overwhelming, not just in their size, but just it seems to be very scattered. And for me, that having such a scattered collection would make me not want to keep purchasing because I might not even know which cards I have, and I'd be afraid of just like a lot of redundancy, or I'm starting one project, but another project's not done. So there's a lot of back and forth. Now, there's always going to be some degree of that, and collecting should be fun. It shouldn't, always have to follow all these strict rules. But once again, like so many things in life, there needs to be balance. And if you're not organizing your collection, or I should say for me, if I saw my collection spinning out of control, without proper storage, that would make me just want to take a breath, slow down, and say, okay, I've got to put some effort into organizing and properly storing, and only then would I move on to adding more pieces.
Yeah, this is a question I've thought about, I think, a lot in my life as a young collector, leading into my adolescence and then my adult years. If I don't know how to or haven't thought about the way something will be stored, I'll be less inclined to collect it. So, for example, Allen and Ginter minis are a perfect example of this. Um,
Okay.
Before they made 15 pocket pages specifically for minis,
Yeah.
I had no interest in collecting them. And even still this day, as we speak, I really don't collect minis outside of the Frank Thomas stuff, and even that it's pretty minimal. But when they produced the 15 pocket pages, I was more interested in looking at minis because now there's an attractive way to collect them and store them. Now I can put them in a binder, and they fit perfectly in those little individual proprietarily sized sleeve pockets, and I can put a lot in a page, and I can put quite a few in a binder. That actually was the catalyst for my choice in collecting the T206 set from 1909 and 1911. Something I
Okay.
casually started working on in 2013, I think, as when I started. I built out a binder for it, and so when some extra cash comes in, I cherry pick a few here and there. But that's helped change my perspective on whether or not I want to collect something like that. So once I've identified an ideal way to store and archive something, that will make collecting whatever that is much more appealing for me, right?
Yeah.
That's just the way
That's
I tackle new projects, though. Once I find or a solution to organization in a way that suits my collecting needs, then um, I will take that collecting objective much more seriously.
okay. I was just thinking of some other examples from like the modern hobby about where cards might be a little bit different size than like a traditional size card. You were mentioning minis. Thinking of like the classic example from my youth anyway was like 1989 Bowman, the oversized
Oh yeah,
cards. I can remember putting those into my like 9 pocket pages as a kid, and they didn't fit.
right.
And because of that, I just like, nah, I don't need any more of these. Like they just didn't fit with anything else. More modern stuff like booklet cards and like box toppers. I think those are really beautiful pieces, but they're just a little, obviously they're different shape, and just figuring out how to store those with the rest of my collection, it it makes me really think hard about adding those kind of cards to my collection. I think a lot of box toppers and booklet cards, they're beautiful, but once again you're just finding that balance of the practical necessity of putting those cards at some secure location that it's easy to view them, to enjoy them, but to keep them safe. So you're just sort of more things that you have to consider before adding such cards to your collection.
Yeah, a cap off before we move on to question three is that for 89 Bowman, I've realized that card savers ones or twos work really well for those. Twos
Okay.
specifically, they're almost perfect sized. I don't put 89 Bowman in anything else because they're sticking out and they're being dinged up all crazy, and that's a really annoying set. But um, box toppers for large jumbo type stuff, I found that putting them in a binder works. Like getting the 2 page pockets and then putting the 3x5s in there or whatever, and then the 4 page, and then putting just kind of makeshifting a binder with the atypical size pockets. That's
Yeah.
worked for me, and so you might look into that. This one question though, and space is a big reason why I don't collect a lot of memorabilia, like clothing and cleats and bats and gloves and yada yada yada. I just don't have the space for it, but I also don't want to just have full, cabinets and dressers and everywhere else that already has my own clothes in it to try to fit clothes of somebody else that I'm not even wearing. It just seems to me like that's a big reason why I specifically don't collect memorabilia. But that aside, I'm glad we got to dissect that question a little bit because I think that's a good one to think about.
Yeah.
So, question three. Regarding minor league cards of star players, what are some reasons why many cards produced from the 90s to present, junk wax statistics aside, aren't nearly as valuable as those found in earlier decades?
Well, the 90s, there was really an explosion in the number of total sets being made, right? And so because of that, any individual sector of the collecting world, it was harder for it to find a niche. And so you had some good minor league sets in the 90s, but there's just so many other sets that things just sort of get lost in the shuffle. I think with some of the older minor league sets, because there was just fewer overall sets to start with, it was a little bit easier for collectors to say, okay, I've looked through the fully licensed major league sets. What else is out there? So you have oddball sets, those minor league sets. So I think collectors thirsty for more cards are going to collect what's available. And so when there's not a ton of sets available at the major league sets, minor league sets are a great option. You turn the 90s, there's just such an abundance of sets. Obviously certain minor league cards, are important pieces in the hobby, but it's just, I think they were just maybe overwhelmed by not only the number of sets, but new technologies in the 90s. Some of the great insert sets, the foil process, the refractors, like there was just more variety of stuff in the 90s, and maybe some of those minor league cards started to get lost in the shuffle.
Well, I'm talking specifically about the comparison between minor league cards of today and minor league cards of, say, the 70s and 80s. And granted, you know, the Bowman Chrome rookie cards are always they seem to always outperform a lot of the minor league issues, no matter what. But back in like the late 70s and early 80s, the minor league Ricky Henderson, the minor league Cal Ripken, some of those are minor league Wade Boggs, Ryan Sandberg, minor league Tony Gwynns, minor league Greg Maddux. I mean, those are all highly desirable and highly collectible. Minor league King Griffey Jr. stuff, some of those really high-end pieces, the platinum border, those have significant collectability and value. Whereas if you fast forward, and again, junk wax stats aside, I get they overproduced a lot of this stuff, but the collectability has gone quite a bit down. People aren't focusing on minor league cards anymore. They're looking for Bowman Chrome autos, right? They're not looking for their collegiate releases or whatever else. But there's a lot of highly valuable collegiate releases that came out of the 80s. And how come we don't see as much of that in the 90s to now? It seems like because of Bowman Chrome, all the minor league stuff is sort of overshadowed. Because Bowman Chrome, what they do is produce the card with the player and the team jersey before they're even called up to the majors. So in fact, in a way, Bowman Chrome are producing minor league cards, but they're licensed by both MLB and MLBPA, so they're actually they still qualify as rookie cards, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, another example of this is Albert Pujols. His rookie cards mostly outperform his minor league cards from the same year, 2001. He has some, nice minor league cards that year, but they're just less collectability associated with them. People want all the major brand stuff from him, the Donruss, Fleer, Bowman, Topps even, Upper Deck. And so, my question is, why is it that minor league cards now are less desirable than they were back in the 80s and 70s? And I think that you touched on something, that the major brands are producing much more desirable looking cards that, myself included, I'd rather have Bowman Chrome Refractor than some matte finish, white cardboard, white cardstock, collegiate release of a player. But granted, I like that too because of its obscurity, its uniqueness, and it doesn't have a lot of conversation around it. And so I appreciate that piece of it. I mean, I guess looking back on, say, the Pujols, that's 16 years ago today. We have a 2001 Pujols minor league card. And it's just not as collectible as his 2001 rookie stuff. So why is that, would you say?
Well, I think part of it is, generally speaking, collectors like to, or at least for me, I guess I don't want to generalize too much, but, I think a lot of people, when let's say they're busting a box of cards, right?
Yeah.
It's more exciting, I think, if you know more of the players. So generally speaking, like people know more major league players than minor league players. And so I think from sort of like how our cards obtained, collectors are going to naturally gravitate towards minor league or towards the major league rookie cards, because when they open a box, they're not after just the rookie cards. They're after veteran players, well-established veteran players that they also know. Whereas if you open like a minor league product, you might know some really, top-notch prospects, but a lot of those players, you don't know who they are yet. And so I think there's that desirability of saying, okay, I want a good rookie card of a certain player, but if I don't get that rookie card, if I don't get it, I'm still going to have a handful of players that I do know that I do enjoy. Whereas if I open, a box of a minor league product now, 2017, and I'm looking through it, I'm going to know some of those minor league guys, the highly touted prospects, but I'm going to end up with a larger stack of players that I have no idea who these guys are. Most of them, are not going to have, much of a major league career. That's just the reality of the situation. So I think what may happen is now, we don't know over time which minor league cards from 2017 are going to be a big deal 15 years from now. But it wouldn't surprise me if, 15 years from now, individual minor league cards that are being made now, they're going to, for the star players, whoever those star players end up being, there's going to be a market for them. But I just think, once again, major league boxes and packs, they're just more exciting to open. So from like an initial, once again, production point of view, how are cards entering the market? Someone's got to open a pack. Someone's got to open a box. I think there's a natural gravitation towards the major league stuff.
I mean, all that stuff could be applied to the Bowman Chrome category, right? Like, we don't know who these guys are. Maybe in 7 years you'll see an all-star in there, but some of them will probably just flounder and they'll have a year career or they'll never make the majors, right?
Yeah.
But it's fun to see and prospect who's going to be hot, and then it's fun to get an autograph out of a pack. I mean, let's just face it. It's fun to see an autographed card on a Bowman Chrome. I mean, there's something very pleasing about that in a way, and the various colored refractors. It's kind of fun to collect that product. I don't do it myself, but it's fun to watch and see who is hot. So, good stuff. I'm glad we got to talk about that. Do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, just one other quick thing. Right or wrong, just the reality of the situation is that the hobby over time has gravitated towards Bowman Chrome rookie cards. And because this is an expensive, collecting cards is an expensive hobby,
right,
there's always going to be that practical component to which cards you purchase. And over time, the hobby is driven towards, Bowman Chrome rookie cards. Collectors know that, right or wrong, these cards are likely to have more value over time. So there's a natural tendency to focus on, that product or those types of products over minor league stuff. So there's sort of that component over time, that practical aspect of knowing what other collectors like, which kind of sets are more likely to, retain value over time. People, I think, are maybe thinking, now with the new stuff, sort of along those lines as well. I think that affects things.
Good stuff, man. Good stuff. So that is it. And thank you for tuning in to Radicards.com. And until next time, enjoy collecting. If you like this content, please subscribe. Thank you. Enjoy collecting.